I'm now getting messages to say that it has started recording, but
oh, I see it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it. Recording, Councillor Binks.
Do you want me to go through the rigmarole again?
Yes, please.
Okay, off we go then. Could I ask that the recording of the meeting is now started? Good morning and welcome to the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Board. I must confirm that it is being recorded. As you know, we're not able to hold meetings in public and at our usual location due to the government guidance on public health measures to tackle the COVID-19 emergency. Therefore, it is important that we take these steps available to us to make the proceedings of this board open to scrutiny, not only by the public, but also by all other elected members. And I can advise that the recording of this meeting will be available to watch on Renfrewshire Council's website following the meeting. Although most members of the board are familiar with the basic rules to be followed for a meeting held remotely, to ensure that the meeting proceeds efficiently, there are a couple of additional points that I need to bring to your attention. These are: it is even more important when meetings are being recorded that it is only the person who is speaking who has their microphone on. This is because on the recording, if the noise from another microphone is picked up, the picture on the recording may move to the source of that noise and detract from the speaker. And for the same reason, it's important that there is a short pause between speakers to enable the camera to adjust to the new speaker. Members who are accessing by phone only should also put their phones on mute when not addressing the meeting. Before moving on to the agenda, can I ask the clerk to do a roll call of members so that it is clear who is present on the recording?
Thank you, Councillor Binks. Today at the meeting, I have Councillor Binks, Councillor Begg, Councillor Burns, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Graham and Councillor Sharkey. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can move on to the main course of events. Any declarations of interest? Any apologies? No?
No apologies,
Okay.
Councillor Binks.
I will carry straight on then. Right, to item number 1, Audit Scotland report. And who's carrying out this?
Yeah, good morning.
Chair, thank you. I'll pick this up.
Sorry, John, on you go.
It's all right, Alistair. Did you want to say a few words first?
Just to introduce very briefly the paper, John, and if you wouldn't mind, just to introduce it very quickly. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Binks. Just a very quick introduction. Obviously, this is the annual audit report in relation to the 1920 annual accounts provided by Audit Scotland, and John Cornett is the Assistant Director who will speak to the report. I was just going to mention, obviously, in terms of the report itself, the key messages are outlined on at page 5 of your pack. I'm sure John will want to highlight some of those, and I'm happy to answer any particular questions in relation to the accounts themselves when we move through this item and the following items on the agenda. So apologies, John, on you go.
Does anybody have any questions? Happy to accept the report.
Councillor
Okay.
Binks, Councillor Binks, can I just say John Cornett is going to give us a bit of detail around the report. Thank you.
Is he there?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Very quickly, I will make the assumption, Chair, that the report has been read, and so I won't go through it page by page, and really just want to focus on the key messages, which, as Alistair has already said, are on, I think I've got them on page 9 of my pack. They're on page 3 of our report. The overriding message and the key message that I need to share with you is that we plan to issue an unqualified opinion on the 1920 accounts for the council, and that's the opinion that you're looking to. Opinion that says that the accounts present a true and fair view of the financial position of the council. So as I say, that's the outcome you're looking to achieve. The accounts themselves were provided to us to a very high standard. The quality of the document was really good, and the quality of the supporting working papers that were with the document and with the accounts were also to a really high standard. Committee will appreciate that this year has been quite challenging, particularly in terms of the impact of COVID-19, remote working and delivering both the council's business but also the audit from a remote environment. And I just wanted to express my thanks to Alistair and the rest of the finance team for the help and support that they've given us over that period. I know it hasn't been easy for them or us, and the support that we've had has been absolutely fantastic in terms of the way the relationship has worked. And that's not to say that the relationship's been too cosy and too close. It has just been a genuine partnership to move the accounts and the audit forward. So I would like to express my thanks to Alistair and the team for that. A couple of key messages for you in terms of the accounts document themselves. You'll see from paragraph 2 in our key messages that we are intending to include what is known as an emphasis of matter paragraph in our opinion. And this relates to the valuation of land and buildings disclosed in the council's accounts. And as part of those disclosures, you have included a paragraph and disclosures setting out the valuer's considerations of land and buildings and property valuations. And he has concluded that there are material uncertainties around some of those valuations because of the impact of COVID-19. So our emphasis of matter paragraph does nothing more than simply draw the reader's attention to the disclosures that you have already made in the accounts. And it doesn't add or pass any commentary on those disclosures. It just fundamentally says that these are really important disclosures that the council has made, and as a reader that you should look at them. So that's the purpose of that paragraph. We say a little bit there about the McLeod case and how things have moved after you submitted the accounts for audit, and that's common with all councils across Scotland. So you're not alone in that situation. And sorry, I should have said also in terms of the emphasis of matter paragraph, that is a common issue across all public bodies in Scotland. So again, you're not alone in that. Couple of other things in the detail of the report around the accounts themselves. One, you'll see that there was an adjustment to council house or council dwelling valuations as a result of the audit work that we undertook. And the second, you'll see that there's been an adjustment to the accounts in relation to the Clyde Valley waste disposal arrangements, the Bargeddy arrangement. Just to give you the assurance that our view is that they're sort of one-off isolated errors, and they're not systematic issues that give us any cause for concern. They're just adjustments that have been made through the normal course of the audit. The rest of the key messages, Chair, deal with our wider dimensions work around financial management and financial sustainability, before moving on to governance, transparency and best value. In terms of financial management and financial sustainability, it's a very, very positive message for the council in terms of the arrangements that you've got in place and the action that you've taken to deliver your plans. That doesn't mean to say that things will be easy and plain sailing going forward, particularly around the financial sustainability. We've talked about the impact of COVID-19. This overlays the challenges that you were already facing, and the challenges were already quite difficult, and these have made a difficult situation even worse, if you see what I mean. So we've made a number of recommendations, and there are a number of points in the report around financial sustainability, but we don't underestimate the difficulty that it's going to entail to move forward with that, both in terms of the actions that you need to take and also the decisions that you as elected members need to take to move the council's plans forward, as I say, particularly to address the challenge of COVID-19. In terms of governance and transparency, we've recognised the changes that you put in place to governance arrangements to respond to COVID-19, and again that we've concluded that those arrangements were appropriate and that they were effective in supporting good governance and accountability. So again, it's a very positive message. And then similarly, it's a positive message around best value and the actions that you've taken, both to ensure that you have an effective best value framework in place, but also to respond to the recommendations and the actions arising from our best value report, which was three or so years ago. Chair, that was all I was going to say by way of comments on the paper. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper and the detail of the paper itself, or to explore some of the issues in there in more detail, if that would be helpful.
Bill, you're on mute.
Councillor Begg.
Thank you, Bill. On page 6, item 12, there you're putting the onus on us. Success in this area will inevitably require difficult decisions on part of elected members. And this is a COVID-19. Do you see that point, John? And if
Yes,
yes,
I
and
do.
if I go over to page 22 of 368, there you'll see with a deficit of 6 million.
Yes, got it.
Yes. When you come, you will obviously audit the main government, the Scottish government. Will you be drawing to their attention the shortfalls being given to the councils to cope with COVID-19?
There's a number of pieces of work that are happening nationally around this, Councillor. One is to understand the impact on public sector finances across Scotland, and so that's going to be at a very high level with Scottish Government. And then there's another piece of work that's ongoing that will assess the financial impact at the local level of the impact of COVID-19, and those messages that you talked about will be considered as part of those broader national reports. So although we won't do something specific on the back of our work with you as an individual council, they will form part of the national consideration through those reports.
Thank you.
Councillor Starkey.
Thanks, Chair. In fact, it was exactly the same bit of the report that I was drawn to as Councillor Begg's. Slightly a different question, though. In terms of the increasing pressures that the council's going to face, does that mean that we have to assume that the Scottish Government is not going to fully reimburse us the cost of COVID? So just to follow that point. I've also got a separate point, and it's something that I do bring up at this meeting and other meetings where it's appropriate. Can you confirm that I'm still being heard? Thank you. Right, sorry, my screen went blank there for a minute. My apologies. Also on the same page, page 6 of 368, right, point 14, as it talks about officers and elected members, right, should together ensure training provided reflects new ways of working. And it may just be my tin ear, but what I'm hearing here is that not training as in education and further enlightenment of officers, but more the sort of training that a lion tamer gives his lions, right, trying to keep us in order. Have I misinterpreted that, or are we talking about getting the proper skills for councillors to do the proper challenges to the many tasks and difficulties that we have ahead?
Chair, can I come back on both of those points, please?
Yes, certainly.
In terms of the first point that you make, Councillor, around assumptions about the level of Scottish Government funding and whether that will fully cover the cost of the impact of COVID-19. I think at the moment it's probably inappropriate and dangerous to make any assumptions about the funding that might come through. The funding that Scottish Government is able to provide will necessarily depend upon decisions taken at UK government level and the impact on the Barnett consequentials and what that might mean flowing through from national government. And at the moment, I think that's unclear and uncertain, and so we just need to wait to see what happens with that. In terms of the second question around training to officers, our sense of this is that fundamentally there's almost 3 different types of training that can and should be provided at various points, and that can range from sort of what I would term as technical training in terms of understanding how a council works and what the key issues are around the operation of the council. There can be training around the softer skills in terms of how to offer constructive, appropriate and challenge and engage in difficult conversations. And there can be training that is essentially the exchange and the sharing of information and data and that sort of area. I think it's probably two ways of looking at this. It's one for members to determine which elements of those three elements of training that they might like to see develop. And that can be both as a group of councillors across the whole council, not just within political groups, but that can also be at a local level and an individual level as well. And I think there needs to be something that's sort of almost top down from the council in terms of, you know, what they want to do to help and develop the elected members based on what the members are looking for. So I think it's a two-way conversation, councillor. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily about providing line training, as you phrased it. It's more about understanding what needs to be provided, what would like to be provided, and what should be provided. So I think it's more of a nuanced conversation than that, I think, councillor.
Any further questions?
So I did put my hand up again, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Right.
Just the supplementary there. I have understood, and I did put it in the provocative way, but I can assure you that I have been at the sort of meeting where councillors were being told this is what you should be doing because I'm a professional. And I was a wee bit disappointed as when you were talking about the types of training that you didn't also include a formal qualification. Right now, as long as councillors are not eligible to go forward, with the council's support and permission to get professional qualifications, they will always be told by professionals, "Oh, this is my profession. This is what I'm qualified in. You're not qualified in it, so you'd better do this." And I think that fundamentally undermines the democratic process if we're just going to be told what to do, like the lines that I use in my analogy.
Chair, I don't know if you want me to respond to that.
Would you like to come back on that?
I take the point, councillor, and I think that's something that's always worth exploring in terms of actually members' understanding of the various professions. Without being flippant and without being seen to be patronising, my view on this is that councillors generally need to be and must be almost jack of all trades without necessarily having specific professionalisms in certain areas of council business, and that's fundamentally because of the wide range of activities that a council undertakes. And so my sense is that whilst I understand where you're coming from, I think it's more important to keep the broad range of knowledge and skills up around the whole of the council as activities rather than specialise in one area.
Would you like to come back on that, Jim?
Sorry, it was never my intention to get into a debate with John about that. The point I was making is that if a particular councillor, and I'm not saying that every councillor was going to have every specialism, but where a councillor particularly desires to go down that route, sometimes that desire for that knowledge is piqued actually by his experience on the council. And I've seen in another council where that was encouraged, and that councillor, although he's no longer a councillor, holds a fairly high position in the field that he went on to do. And all I'm saying is that if there was a greater encouragement of more professional qualifications chosen by the councillor, then perhaps it would be of benefit both to the councillor and to the council as a whole going on. So it wasn't to seek a debate here, and as I preface my remarks, whenever the opportunity comes up, I do take the opportunity to point out that this is a difficulty with local government and something that we should try to rectify. But if we had those across 43 of us, right, I doubt we would all want, for instance, a law degree, right, for that. But right, if one or two of us were perhaps studying the law, it might mean that our lawyers would have to be a wee bit sharper, right? If someone's coming back saying, well, this is the local thing. And I hope that it was taken in that spirit, and I see you smiling there. And, in the spirit of that, can I just say congratulations between your curtains and your shirt. I think it's excellent, right?
Thank you. Any more comments from anybody? You happy to accept the report? Okay. We go on to item number 2. Audit annual accounts, Ramsgate Council.
Yeah. Thanks, convener. I'll just cover this briefly. Obviously, as John has covered off, the opinion on the accounts is unqualified. We have made some changes as was outlined. John mentioned earlier on item 1, there were some changes that were agreed over the course of the audit process, and they have been reflected in the version of the accounts in front of you, or that was published in the pack. I should mention that in terms of making those changes, there were two minor areas where the full changes didn't quite flow through the accounts in the published version that you have in front of you. So there will be a revised version of the audited accounts that will be distributed to members in advance of the council meeting later today. With the 2 minor corrections that I'm happy to outline to the committee. And they are on, it's on page 7 of the accounts, which is page 63 of your pack, where we, let's just find it here. There is a figure within the management commentary that there was an oversight in terms of updating that figure for one of the changes that went through. If we can just find it here. Yep. So on page 7 of the accounts, which is page 63 of your papers, the leftmost column on the very bottom sentence reads within the pack just now, the actual CFR at 31st March 2020 was 369.9 million. That figure should actually be £375 million, and that's as a consequence of the change that was agreed with in the recognising the Clyde Valley Waste Facility. And then moving to page 93 of your pack, in note 3, again there was a slight oversight in terms of one of the changes flowing through from the MacLeod pension change adjustment on the employee benefits expenses line. The current figure that's in there for 1920 is 316.574 million. That figure should be 308.455 million, and as I mentioned, those figures will be updated in a revised set of audit accounts that will be distributed to members. But otherwise, I'm seeking approval of the recommendations and the approval of the recommendation to recommend to council approval of the accounts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alistair. Any comments? Happy to approve the accounts? Right, thank you. Item 3 of the agenda, Audit Scotland report to those charged with governance. Thank you. That's Alistair, is it?
Yeah, I can introduce this convener. I'm not sure if either John or potentially Mark Ferris might want to speak to the report. This is the report charged to those with governance, so not quite the full annual audit report, which covers the council and charities, which was at item 1. But this covers the more technical issues that have arisen over the course of the audit of the charities that the council controls. So the Common Good Funds and the Coates Observatory Trust. the reports don't outline any issues in terms of any issues that arose over the course of the audit. And there's also draft legislation which will be returned to Audit Scotland as part of the audit process. But I'm not sure if John or Mark want to comment on their reports.
Would you like to make a comment, John?
Chair, I'll just come in. It's Mark Ferris here. Just very briefly to add to what Alistair said. So, as you'll see, item 3 covers both the Common Good Funds and the Courts Observatory Trust Fund. The papers covering the Common Good Fund are detailed at pages 171 and 177 of your pack, and the Courts Observatory Trust Fund 178 and 184. Both packs outline the cover letter summarises our audit work and confirms we expect to be able to, again, in line with the Council, be able to issue an unqualified audit opinion pending the Audit Risk and Scrutiny Board this morning, given the recommendation for approval again at full Council on the 26th of November. As Alistair said, it also includes a copy of our proposed independent auditor's opinion and a letter of representation that the Director of Finance and Resources will sign and give back to us as part of the completion process. And that's really all to cover, but more than happy to answer any questions.
Any further comment?
Could I just ask about the letter of representation on page 175? That's the letter of representation we're talking about.
Yes, Councillor Sharkey, it is. Yeah.
It's just the Johnston Common Good Fund. Is that how it's spelled?
I can check that. If it's not, we can make an adjustment to that.
Grand. I'm not from Johnston, but I'm sure that the councillors from there will pick up on it.
They will. Well, we happy with the report? Okay, on to the next item. Item 4. Sorry, item 5. No, 4. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the final item for me in relation to the annual accounts. So these are the actual audited financial statements for the Common Good Funds and for the Courts Observatory Trust. As there were no significant changes that arose over the course of the audit process. Some minor presentational changes were agreed over the course of that process. But we're seeking that the committee note the audited statements and recommend to Council that they be approved. Thank you.
Any comments? Happy to approve that. Good. Okay, item 5, internal audit and counter fraud progress.
Thank you very much, Councillor Binks. That's myself. This is our normal quarterly report. Members will see from the covering report that I am actually asking for 2 areas to be approved. Specifically, these are set out at sort of section 5 of my report, which is I'm asking for the audit plan to be amended. In light of COVID-19, we have undertaken a full review of the audit plan and the time that we have available, as we've sort of used up most of our contingency time at the moment. So it sets out that I'm actually asking members to approve the deletion of 4 audits, and the reasons for that are set out in the paper. And I'm also asking that members approve a delegation to myself until March 2021 in consultation with the convener, that any further adjustments or amendments required to the audit plan can be put through on that basis. That's really the meat of the report, but if I can just sort of briefly cover section 6 as well, which is our counter fraud team. We had suspended most of our counter fraud work sort of initially between sort of March and August time, and the team were heavily involved in providing support through the local assistance team on a secondment basis. But since we've sort of got back up to full capacity, we've been working very heavily with other service areas that are responsible for responding to the assistance programme in relation to COVID-19, and we've been working with them to ensure that issues identified for potential fraud and also like mitigating the likelihood of fraud have been progressed. It's also National Frauds Initiative data upload time, so that has all been completed for the current set of data sets, and we've also self-assessed ourselves against the Audit Scotland checklist, as you can see from the appendix. So I'm happy to take any questions, and as I say, I'm asking members to note the report, but also to approve the delegation and the amendments.
Any questions? We're happy to go ahead with this report. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea. Item 6.
Item 6 is myself again, Councillor.
Yeah.
It's the usual quarterly summary of completed audits. We have assessed most of them as either reasonable or substantial. There is one limited assurance in relation to sporting attendance. I just need members to note that that is in relation to the specific areas that we looked at and not a reflection of the Council's arrangements as a whole. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Chair, I've put my hand up.
You're on mute,
Oh, you're
Councillor
on.
Binks.
Your camera's off. Is that Councillor Sharkey?
Yes.
Your camera's off, so I couldn't see your hand.
All right. I used the yeah. Of course, you wouldn't if the camera's off, but I used the wee raise hand button. Anyway, yeah. I'm on now. Is it all right to speak?
Yes, carry on. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's just on that point that you raised there about the problems that arose with the absent management case. You said that it's not general throughout the organisation, but it is particular here, and it was associated with certain people's difficulty in working business world, as I understand it. Is that correct?
I think it would be fair to say that there was an unfamiliarity with some of the aspects of recording absence on Business World, yes.
That's it. Right, and I just wanted to note that it was Business World that was the confusion, because again, I'm not convinced that the Business World approach has been successful, or will indeed lead to the savings that are proposed for it. Coming back to the point we were making earlier about the difficulties that this council will be facing regarding its budget in the future, and I certainly wouldn't want all our eggs in the one basket of Business World, which, as I said, is confusing, if only for a small number of our staff. I'm finished, Chair.
Would you like to come in again? No, Andrea?
No, I think Councillor Sharp just making his views on Business World.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments? Happy to accept the report. Okay, thank you. We'll go on to item number 7. It's the National Fraud Initiative.
Thank you again, Chair. Item 7 is myself. It's the Audit Scotland National Fraud Initiative report on the 2018-19 exercise. At 3.4 of the report, we set out the council's outcomes from that specific exercise. It's probably worth noting that there are still a small number of cases that are still being worked on as well, but that's the results as they sit in the system at the moment. The report sets out 4 recommendations and what the council is doing in response to those recommendations. And the full report from Audit Scotland is attached to the papers as well. Members have been asked to note the contents of the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No? Okay. Happy to accept the report? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
On to item 8. The emerging fraud risk on COVID-19.
Second last one from me. It's another Audit Scotland report, and it's the first in the series that relates to COVID-19 publications. Again, the report sets out the recommendations that Audit Scotland have made and the Council's response to those recommendations. And again, I'll take any questions in relation to our paper. Thank you.
Is there any likelihood of changes to this report in view of the, new state of risk 4 that's been implemented?
I'll come in briefly on that. I don't think there's any specific areas that would need to be picked up in relation to the recommendations made. Obviously, the Council's emergencies management team have been working hard in relation to our response to level 4 status. I'm not part of the emergencies management team, but I am aware that there's a significant amount of work ongoing in relation to that. So I think if there's anything that does need to get picked up that's covered in that report, then it will be picked up there.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Happy to accept the report.
I think Councillor Sharkey's got his hand up again.
Oh yes.
It wasn't a major point for that. I was happy to overgo it, but just on page 293, right, that does mention our occupational health time for talking and that, and just as they've supported the targeted interventions. Has there been any figures as to the the specific additional work that they've arising out of COVID?
Councillor, I couldn't answer that, but I do see that Stevie Fanning is on the meeting, so I don't know if Stephen would maybe like to come in on that.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that. Councillor Binks, if that's okay, if you don't mind, I'll for Councillor Sharkey's benefit, there's figures in the audit and the absence reports that are in item 12 later on, so there are figures there about the usage. We have had a lot of support and the interventions are in there, Councillor.
You happy with that answer, Councillor Sharkey?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you. We happy with the report? Okay, let's carry on to item 9.
Item 9 is again myself, and this is the second in the COVID-19 series of publications. The report is split into 4 sections in relation to areas that members would be looking for some assurance over. And it details against those recommendations the Council's response and the progress that we have been making in relation to the issues highlighted. Again, I'm happy to take any questions, and I think there's maybe a couple of others on the call that might be able to answer some questions as well.
Councillor Sharkey, you've got your hand up.
That was from the last item, my apologies.
Okay. Happy to accept the report? Okay. Thank you. Item 10, strategic corporate and service risks.
Good morning, everyone. Chair, this is my item. I'll take this one.
Hi, Karen.
Good morning. This is a report that usually comes to board in May, and then around this time of year we're bringing a progress report to board. However, due to the pandemic, we have been revisiting the Council's risk management profile. So we're now presenting a revised set of risks to the board. You'll see at paragraph 3.5, it sets out the revised risks, and maybe just to highlight that we did have two separate risks for COVID, one in relation to our response to the emergency, and the other in relation to our recovery effort. However, the corporate risk management group, along with the emergency management team, felt that the more appropriate approach going forward was actually to actually revisit all of our risks in our risk profile and look to see how they are impacted by COVID, rather than having a standalone COVID risk assessment. So that's the approach that we have taken. Paragraph 3.4 on the paper actually describes the key changes that have taken place in our revisal of our risk profile. And important that members are able to track the changes previously, or from what we previously had as our risk profile moving into the new risk profile. So to try and assist with that, table 2, which is on page 314 of your pack, shows how those changes have been tracked. I know historically it was brought out for another council in the past that it's good practice for members to be able to see where risks are dropping off, for example, and the reasons for that. So that's specifically what that table seeks to help members actually see the movement between what we had in the past and what we're proposing now. And so I suppose in summary, we have 5 strategic risks and 11 corporate risks. We don't have anything significant separately for the service departments, because when we spoke to all the service departments, they confirmed that all their significant risks were reflected within a number of the strategic and corporate risks. Important for the board to note, though, that we have 5 risks which are actually rated as very high and linked to the council's risk appetite. Very high risks are unacceptable. However, these risks are very much externally driven. So, you know, we are doing everything that we can in terms of managing these risks. But as such, they are subject to a higher level of internal scrutiny, and we're, you know, watching these risks, monitoring these risks all the time. I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, the detail is in the appendices for each of the individual risks. Not all risk owners will be represented in the call, but again, if there were any questions for specific risk owners, I'd be happy to take those up. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions?
I've got my hand up, Bill.
Right, Tom.
Just a quickie. I panic when I see a lot of red and amber on reports. Should I panic? And I say that for all councillors. Should we panic?
No, I think is the kind of immediate response I would give. It's not a great position to have as many red risks, certainly. By the nature of a lot of the council services that we provide, we will have a lot of amber risks. We do have a lot of high risks, and they're within the area that we would relate to as being tolerable. Very high, however, is unacceptable, as I've said. But we have known from experience that the council is able to manage with these very high risks. But while I wouldn't suggest that you should panic, we certainly, as a corporate risk management group, are monitoring these on a regular basis. As I said, they will be subject to more scrutiny, more frequent review than other risks would be.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Any more questions? Happy to accept the report? Okay, thank you. Carry on to item 11, Risk Management Annual Report. Is that Karen again?
Chair, yes, that's my report again. I'll present that. This is just the standard annual report that you would usually get again in May. However, just having the opportunity to bring it to you now. It's based around our risk management framework, and it's certainly intended that this report provides assurance to members that we are continuing to do basically what our risk management framework says that we do. There are really just two things I would want to draw your attention to in this report. At the top of page 341 in your pack, first of all, there's a note there about the training, risk management training that we've delivered as part of the Council's management development programmes, the Leaders of the Future programme and Aspire. You'll see there that we've delivered training to 282 colleagues, and this is a tremendous opportunity to spend time with colleagues looking at the Council's arrangements and the approach to managing risk. So 282, I think that's possibly the highest number of colleagues that we've delivered the training to over recent years. And secondly, is just the final paragraph, 9.1. And actually very much linked to the previous item and Councillor Begg's question around the number of red risks that we have. One of the things that we will have to have a look at is revisiting the Council's risk appetite, given that what we are learning with the number of red risks that we are seeing, and also the experience of the last few months would bring us to reconsider or look at what our risk management arrangements as an organisation are, and whether we have opportunities to improve these further going forward. So it would be our intention, the Corporate Risk Management Group, along with the corporate management team, to look at the Council's current risk management framework, any opportunities to update that. And so we would look early next year to bring a revised risk policy and strategy to the board. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Sharkey.
It was on that very last point you were making there, Karen, about the Aspire and Leaders of the Training courses. Are they available to councillors?
I don't think they're marketed as such, but I am absolutely happy to deliver the training course to councillors. Obviously, we would need to do so in a virtual environment now, but absolutely.
My apologies, and just to talk about the virtual environment, my computer went down just as you started speaking, so I could wait for the recording, but if you, just in case I had another question, if you'd repeat it for me, it'd be very useful.
Yeah, I was just saying that the training course isn't marketed specifically towards our elected members, but it is still very relevant to elected members, and I would be more than happy to deliver that for our elected members in a virtual setting.
Thank you for that. I think that might be a good idea. Councillor Begg?
Just a simple one. Would Councillor Sharkey get a certificate at the end of it?
His name would definitely be on the register as having attended. I don't think certificates are issued.
I think Councillor Begg's point is, would I pass?
Well, we don't take a test at the course itself. However, we do have a risk management course which is on iLearn, and it either has a 75 or 80% pass mark for that. So if our elected members haven't had the opportunity to take up that course on iLearn, then I would really encourage you to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions? No. Okay, happy to accept the report?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. On to item 12. We've got two item 12s here. We'll take the first one, Scottish Information Commissioner annual report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This is a summary of the Scottish Information Commissioner's annual report for the financial year 2019-20, as well as how our figures match with their key figures in the report. It shows that we match up well in relation to both the reviews and appeal stats. Of course, I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Councillor Sharkey. Oh, are there any questions then? Any further questions? Okay, happy to accept the report. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On to item, well, should be 13, I believe, and that's the absence statistics. And that's Stephen.
Yeah, that's me, Councillor. Thank you very much for bringing me in there. This is a real number 12, just in case anybody's wondering. The report I've submitted to the board is just to provide some reassurance to the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Board that we have continued to support employees who've been presenting with sickness absence throughout the pandemic. It covers both quarters 1 and quarters 2 of the periods. I'm not going to go into it in full depth, Councillor, but what I'd like to maybe draw out is a couple of the sections. Section 4 is the similar type of information which the board has seen before, but table 1 has been changed slightly just in the graphic to show the variance on year per quarter rather than having a larger amount of figures within there. Section 5.1, the table 2, again defines it as per the reporting groups to Audit Scotland, and it's LGE, teachers and the council overall. So again, there's a very good picture here, as you can see, within quarter 1. And we think that the pandemic and the way in which we moved to how we worked has had an impact, particularly on short-term absence, as we've seen presented. Section 7 of the report starts to detail quarter 2, which was the quarter ending September. And again, on table 3, you can see that the services performance. You can see it's slightly different from section 1, quarter 1 on that report, as you can see, because some of the activities started to kick back in there and people were coming back into the workplace. So there was obviously a slight impact there on the absence, and also as people continue to work from home, we started to see some of the presenting issues like mental health and well-being coming through there, Councillor. So if I can take you through to section 8, details about the trend analysis, but section 10 is the kind of bigger one, and that's the sickness absence reasons and the supportive measures that were put in place for that. Section 10.1 is a new graphic. Again, because we've got the 2 quarters here, it was to show side by side as what the main presenting sickness issues were, and psychological, not work related. So that's basically everything to do with mental ill health, but it's not in the workplace, is still our biggest presenting issue here. As you can see, in quarter 1, it was 30% of the overall absence. In quarter 2, it drifted up to 35%. Now, again, this is in line with the national feeling, Councillor, just because of the fact people are working from home. There's a lot of anxiety around COVID and COVID-19 and also the return to the workplace. So again, this was demonstrated. The second biggest presenting issue is musculoskeletal and joint disorders. It stays the same in both quarters, but again, we do have a lot of council services who are still providing some of those key workers out there, and they're doing physical jobs, so they do pick up a few muscle strains and injuries while they're doing that. And in both quarters 1 and 2 this year, respiratory has become the third most presenting issues. It used to be stomach, bowel and blood disorders, which was always a kind of third presenting issue, but respiratory itself has came in, and that would be linked directly with the COVID-19 and a lot of the other kind of coughs and colds that are out there. The section I'd like to take you further to within section 10 is 10.5 and 10.6. This maybe give Councillor Sharkey some more information as he was looking for. 10.6 details the time for talking appointments. There was 74 appointments over spanning both quarters, and I've detailed the reasons there. again, the biggest presenting issue with 74.4% of the appointments being taken up were to do with personal mental health and well-being issues, and that's stress and anxiety and panic, depression and self-worth. And again, those two are very high at the top there, because stress and anxiety is within our younger audience within the workforce, and depression seems to come into our kind of over 40s. So again, it's looking to see those interventions. Work and personal is that mixture where somebody can't really separate completely, or there could be some elements of their job that impacts on their mental health and well-being. And for 14.8%, work related was the biggest presenting issue to the counselling service. Part of that was change. Some people couldn't cope with having to work from home in that period, and again, we had to put some intervention in to support them. And for others, it was just a demand in the pace of the work as they carried through. Section 12 of the report, Councillor, takes you through some of the key strategic interventions and the measures we've taken there. As you can see, one of the most preventive measures we've taken was to start very early on the seasonal flu vaccine and get everything in place for that. We've done that during Q1, and it kicked off during Q2, and I'm happy to say that this week, by the end of this week, all the flu vaccinations within the school population for our workforce will be complete, and we've still got a number of appointments to be taken up through the vaccines at our occupational health provider. I'll leave the rest of it there, Councillor, and I'll take any questions if anybody's got any.
Councillor Starkey.
Sorry, my screen was flickering in and out again there. So, and with respect to my earlier question, you're now saying that 10.6, that's on the page 6 of 10, according to the paper I've got in front of me. That's where it says work and personal. The stress anxiety is all related to to the coronavirus, COVID-19. That 10.8 figure is that the figure?
Not all of the 10.8. That's the two biggest issues that are in work and personal, Councillor. Both were those that kind of presenting there. Coronavirus, people were having concerns about it. Those were some of our key workers that were delivering the services within care at home, and also were frontline workers with refuse collection and roads. Some of them had some coronavirus concerns, and we also had a number of people who had just had stress and anxiety. Were maybe for relation to childcare issues or managing or being a carer, so therefore they had to try and balance their work life and their personal life, and it caused them some concern.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I was asking, if we had figures that were specifically for coronavirus, the ordinary run of the mill, if that's the right expression, for stress and anxiety still continues as the underlying amount. Now, and my particular question was about how that was impacting on our counselling service, the time for talking, because in 10.5 it's 10.4 rather, particularly says about cognitive behavioural therapy for the more complex psychological cases. And again, one of the things that I hope that we don't fall into the trap of is thinking that there's only one type of counselling, and that it's the it's the best in every particular occasion. So there's the issue about person-centred counselling being probably taking longer, being more expensive. But I would argue, right, from my own experience, that it's probably the more effective, in the longer term, rather than just getting people patched up and back to work, right. That's not to criticise those practitioners of CBT, but I don't want us, because of the pressure of work that's on time for talking, that they don't, that they only concentrate on one particular type. It may seem like an esoteric point right now to people when we're dealing with the, a life-threatening illness, right, in terms of COVID, right? But in longer term, right, if we just patch people up and leave them to develop the problem later on down the road, then we get much more of the psychological issues that are coming up. Also, in your new graphic that you have on page 5 of the 10, the one that's comparing the first quarter with the second quarter, the respiratory diseases seem to be going down, which I would have expected them to go up in the current situation. If there's an explanation for that, I'd be glad to hear it. And just one final point. Both our occupational health service and our counselling service, how much of the people that approach them do they then signpost on to some other service? It particularly gets mentioned here, the National Health Service, right? But is there a great deal of signposting, as in, someone comes to them, they get to tick them off in the list of clients seen, but in fact it's another organisation, which deals perhaps more with a greater speciality. And I come back again then to the point about person-centred, right? If Time for Talking doesn't have any person-centred counsellors, and there's a need for a person-centred approach with somebody, do they then just pass them on to an organisation that's more appropriate? And do we sift out that they said that nuance between people that they've dealt with as opposed to people they've just disposed of?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back in and respond on that, Councillor. First of all, thank you for the comments on the report so far. And in relation to the graphic, we're trying to obviously improve the way in which we present our information to the councillors. In relation to the Time for Talking's capacity and this person-centred approach, CBT is delivered through our occupational health provider using a different counselling specialist that way, councillor. So we do have a qualified CBT practitioner through the occupational health service, and the Time for Talking service do have a range of types of counsellors available also. So we don't always put all our eggs in one basket. I like to make sure that we support people in the right way, because as we've discussed before, counselling is something that's very bespoke to the individual, and it's how they respond to that is how the best treatment comes through for it. And we do have at times when we've felt that through the professional's advice that the person may need to be signposted further onwards to either psychology or psychiatry. And again, that's where we've involved the person's GP, and also their if they are seeing a specialist in relation to their mental ill health, then we'll tie in with them as well. We do try and signpost where we can. We will use our Occ Health and our Time for Talking services to the best that we can, but we do realise that there is an extent on the professionalism that's in there and the ability to deliver those services in the correct way to support those individuals. So we make sure that the person's at the centre of this all the time, and it's the best for them. It's not a case of trying to shoehorn them into a type of activity or support mechanism. And finally, on the kind of last part of it, we certainly do, and we work together with both our Occ Health provider and our Time for Talking services to make sure that we explore every avenue to see what we can do for that person. And when there's new and emerging different types of research or treatments available, we'll certainly discuss that with the practitioners before we apply them for staff.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Begg?
Yeah, Stephen, could I just come in on a couple of quick ones? Your quarter begins in April, is that correct? Your first quarter?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. 1st of April to the 30th of June. And
That's
apologies
okay.
for not bringing that. Normally, I would get that to this board in that time frame, but we just had a few data correction issues that we wanted to make sure we're providing the board with the correct numbers and the time frame.
Also, it took me a little while to get my head wrapped around the new presentation. I was used to the previous one, which I thought was very good. But this, I'm sure this will grow on me. Is this the same report that will go to the JCB?
That's absolutely correct, Councillor. We've got to get approval here for the board to be noted by yourselves and approved to take forward. I'll take it to the JCB and also to the teachers' JNC.
Right, thank you. Another thing, something Councillor Sharkey said got my mind going. Is there any evidence of people coming to you rather than going to a hospital?
We certainly, during the period, Councillor, we took a number of different calls through the Time for Talking service, and we had a dedicated COVID line set up through the Occupational Health Service. But most of the concerns that we came through on the line were about people's own personal circumstances. So some people thought they may get furloughed, others were worried about if their job would still be there at the end of this period. So there's no evidence to show 100% whether they came to us or whether they went to hospital, but we certainly offer the service the best we can. But we certainly do say up front that we're not a medical triage service. We're here to support people who are presenting sickness absence in the workforce.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Begg. Thank you, Stephen. Questions? Happy to accept the report? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Carry on to item 14, Scottish Public Service Ombudsman.
That's myself, Councillor Binks.
Thank
you. This is the SPSO's annual report for 2019-20. Out of there was 4,332 complaints and inquiries, and the health sector was a sector about which the SPSO received the most complaints, and the local authority were the second highest. In last year, the SPSO saw an increase in the overall caseload compared with the previous year. Nationally, last year, the SPSO received 5,901 complaints and inquiries, and that compared to 5,895 the previous year. There were 4,332 complaints which were received compared to 4,188 the previous year. And of those 4,332 complaints handled, 588 of those went to full investigation, and that compared to 711 the previous year. So the 588 complaints investigated were upheld or partly upheld, and it was noted that this was the third year in a row that the uphold rate had remained stable. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the number of cases closed because of the hiatus in delivering services and the impact of staff resources. No complaints were received specific for specific organisations, and that is Renfrewshire Council. However, information that was received separately indicates that the number of complaints that were determined by the SPSO, which were relative to Renfrewshire, was 47. And those 47, there's a breakdown in item 4.6 of the outcome of those 47 complaints that were determined. And I have to say that none of those went to investigation stage. 4.7 in the report says that there were 54 cases that were received last year relative to Renfrewshire. And the main subjects of these are broken down into departments, and the figures are detailed beside it with the last year's figures in brackets. In 2019-20, the council received a total of 7,633 complaints, and that compared with 8,200 the year previous. And there is an annual report on the council's complaints which will be considered at a future meeting of this board. I believe it's coming to the next board. Items 5 and 6 are just, or item 5 I should say, is just looking forward what's happening within the SPSO. Again, COVID-19 and the lockdown has had a major impact, and they're obviously looking at delivering their areas with in terms of how they're going to be investigated, and they're going to be looking at how that is kept going. 5.2, the implementation of the independent national whistleblowers office role was supposed to go live on the 1st of July, but that has now been held back because of COVID. And they're going to be looking at when that's going to be implemented. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Begg. Councillor Begg.
I left my hand up from the previous thing. I did a Councillor Sharkey mistake.
All right. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Touché.
Are there any questions? Happy to accept the report. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
On to item 15.
That's myself again,
That's
Councillor
again.
Binks. You'd have to listen to my voice for a bit longer. Apologies. The Ethical Standards Annual Report for 2019-20, there is a link to their report, to their annual report on the report there. But this report relates to the strategic plan for 2020-2024. Last year, I indicated in my report that we had a new Commissioner, Caroline Anderson, who was commencing on the 1st of April 2019, and she had said that she was going to go through a major restructure. She has found this incredibly challenging, and obviously COVID-19 has had a significant impact on this. However, despite the challenges of the remote working in the emergency context, they have managed to double their volume of incoming complaints and cleared their backlog. So with regard to the complaints themselves, the Commission experienced an increase in the number of complaints that were received, and the largest category of complaints related to quasi-judicial or regulatory applications. There was 95 of those. During 1920, the Commission received a total of 284 complaints, compared with 173 in the previous year. And there's a breakdown of where these complaints have came from in 3.4. There's also a table at 3.5 which details the categories of complaints that were received, the number of complaints, and there's a comparison with the previous year's figures in there as well. Nationally, a total of 29 cases progressed to full investigation and were reported on and finalised during the year, with 4 being breach reports. That was 8 complaints, which were heard by the Standards Commission, and 13 being reported as non-breach, which was 21 complaints. The pandemic delayed completion of a number of the investigations until the year end, and these are included in their open at year-end figures. Now, within the report itself, there is no specific figures relating to Renfrewshire Council. However, I received separate information from them, which indicated that during the period covered by the report, there were 5 complaints received, compared with 3 in the previous year and in 2017-18. With regard to the Code of Conduct, lockdown arrangements has meant that the council hasn't been able to deliver against its council's induction programme of events and development opportunities. However, I have indicated that the head of corporate governance is available for members should they wish to seek any advice on the Code of Conduct, and generally. Item 5 details the public appointments within the Commission, and item 6 just details their future plans. I'm happy to take any comments.
Councillor Begg.
Yeah, just in reading your graph on 3.5, the 2 blues are not clear to me. Is the lower line the latest ones?
The lowest line is 2019-20. And the green, as you can see it, is 2018-19, and the blue is 2019-20, Councillor Begg.
Mine are both blue on my printout.
All right, okay.
Right.
There should be a darker, what appears to be like a darker blue. It is actually green. I don't know what's happened to your printing.
Okay. It's very faint. Maybe it's my eyes. And also, it's slightly flippant. There's no disrespect by councillors shown on the list.
That's the list is made up by the Commissioner, and obviously the disrespect will be included in one of those, but I'm not quite sure which one, Councillor Begg.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Happy to accept the report? Okay, thank you. I'll carry on to item 16. Conversion of grassed areas to parking. That's Michael, I think.
Yeah, that's myself. Thank you, Councillor Binks. Councillor Binks, before I start, I've actually had to get some unavoidable building work done at home, so apologies if there's any background noise during this item.
Right.
So this is proposed to be the final report for this particular review. So it's a short report to board which provides a copy of a draft report to full council. Within the report to full council, you'll see under section 5 the key findings as previously reported to this board are highlighted. Section 6 draws out the conclusions from the key findings and what that would mean in terms of the review itself. And section 7 of the report puts in 2 key recommendations to take forward. So the board are asked to consider the findings and the recommendation provided within the report and approve for the report to be submitted to full council at the meeting of the 16th of December 2020. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to say that I'm actually very disappointed in this report, and I'm going to ask to be for it to be continued to the next meeting, and I'll just explain why for that. First of all, this report came forward because we were looking to get a more general way of dealing with these small grass areas in what tended to be council or ex-council house estates, where it had been put in for decorative purpose, and the council was going to maintain it in perpetuity when it was put there. At the time these houses were built, there wasn't a parking problem. The working person was supposed to go to work on his bike to the very nearby factory, right? All these circumstances have changed as we've known, right, which is creating pressure in a number of areas. And I personally was involved in Hunter Hill in getting 2 of these areas changed over at different times, and knew the complexity and difficulty and arguments that had to go about doing this. And really the point, or what I was looking for out of this report, was a much more cooperative way of dealing with, in terms of the council's attitude to this. And that's why I think that this report is unsatisfactory, because it does quite correctly point out that we're not, recording these applications, properly, right? It also claims that we have a number, various processes. Again, I would be looking for simplification. Various processes, by which individuals and organisations can, seek to convert these places. But what I'm looking for is, one process, one easy stop to get this work done. But then it contradicts itself, right, by later in the report saying how expensive these things, can be. Because I think we get into the real reason that, any council department, if it can say no, says no, right? And if it can say no because there's a potential expense involved, then it's an easy get out for them. So this report gives that get out. But that isn't actually, as far as I'm concerned, the most crushing argument against this particular report. This report was about changing grassed areas of the nature I described earlier on, for that, not open spaces. There, and open spaces have been added in here, right, in a way that I don't think is appropriate, and would certainly want that changed before I could approve this report. And just finally, one of the meetings I've had this week was the investment board, and in the investment board we talked about the investments that this council still has, although they're very minor, still has in the oil and gas industry. Now, if we are still investing in the oil and gas industry, which, as far as I'm concerned, is an hypocrisy. If we are committed to the council's declaration of climate emergency on the 27th of June, but then to use that, right, as an excuse to grow weeds instead of having people, because that's the situation now. These grass spaces aren't maintained in the way that they should be. If we're going to say it's better to grow weeds and have people get a place to park their car, then and we're using climate emergency as the excuse for that, I'm not going to support that in any way. So I'm sorry if this comes across as a bit harsh, right, in this, but we need to be seen, right, to be using issues like climate emergency honestly, right, and forthrightly, and it's not an argument, right, for stopping people getting to park their cars, right. So let's drop that completely in the revised version, which I hope will come to the next meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Begg.
I have a slight sympathy with Jim, because as I was reading that, I could hear Johnny Mitchell singing "They Paved Paradise and Put Up a Parking Lot" and that sort of thing. But I think we're lucky to live in a council area that is very green, certainly where I'm living, and certainly my ward is very green, and I don't think the odd corner and the odd spot here. And when we've got bin lorries that have trouble getting in and out because of people parked on the roads, and we can't fill the bins up properly, and different bins get left behind, I certainly have a sympathy with what's in the report, and so therefore I will not be supporting Jim in this. I don't know about other councillors, but I think we've got to move forward on this, and I think this is the right way to go, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Binks, are you prepared to accept Councillor Sharkey's amendment?
No.
Can I then have, sorry, in the absence of a seconder, and I don't see anybody coming forward there, can I have my dissent recorded?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more comments? Right, thank you. The next item 16, that's is an exempt item. So those not concerned with this exempt item, can I ask you to leave? And I presume that the recording will cease at this point.
Duncan, can you switch the recording off, please?